Welcome back, or if it's your first time, I'm glad to have you here. I'm Matt Fendora, and you're tuned in to the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast, where we journey together toward becoming the best version of ourselves. Using mind, body, heart, and spirit as the anchors of our podcast, join me as we set sail into the depths of self-discovery, unraveling the interconnected layers that shape our growth. If you resonate with today's conversation, consider subscribing to the podcast. Your support means the world to us and ensures you never miss an empowering episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast, your go-to destination for personal growth and empowerment. Whether you're a loyal listener or a newcomer, I'm grateful for your presence. Today, we have the pleasure of chatting with Amanda Stern. Amanda Stern has been journaling since she was an angsty teenager. She credits her practice to helping her thrive through the divorce she didn't see coming, discover her voice, and become the person she always wanted to be. Now she empowers her clients and community to embrace journaling as a path to self-discovery and personal transformation so they can own their worth, find success on their own terms, and write their own way to a life they love. Some of Amanda's proudest accomplishments are parenting 3 amazing children, thriving through a divorce she didn't want and didn't see coming, and learning to truly love herself. What makes her heart sing? Seeing her clients learn to embrace who they are and to truly learn to love themselves. Also spending time with her children and in her garden, though not with her children in her garden because it's not their jam, and that's okay. Without further ado, here's Amanda. How are you doing today, Amanda?
I'm so well. How are you, Matt?
I'm really well. I'm excited for this conversation because journaling is such a foundational tool that I've noticed when I start to interview people. Most people, in some way, have some sort of journaling exercise or practice that they do, and it shows in their work because they're just able to, whether that's remain uh, committed, authentic, whatever that may be. So I'm excited to dive into all things journaling with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. I could talk about journaling all day long, but I promise all of your listeners that I will not talk all day long.
So you said that journaling for you started in your teenage years. Could you start with that journey?
Yeah. So I had one of those days sometime early on in high school where I just had all of the big angsty teenage feelings. I don't remember what had happened, but I remember that I felt overwhelmed and yucky, and I just had all of these feelings that I didn't know what to do with. And none of my friends could come to the phone. And I didn't have a relationship with my family where I could offload all of this onto them. So I picked up my pencil and a old spiral bound notebook and I just started to write. Now, I had always been a writer. I'd written for school. I mean, that's what I did is I wrote, but that was the first time I really connected writing with how I felt. And I can't tell you what I wrote, but I can tell you that I felt so much better. I felt lighter. And I thought, there is something here. And so I picked up my pen the next night and again the next and the next. And I built this really robust journaling practice. And in the beginning, there was nothing revolutionary about the way I journaled. It was very historical. I would, every night before bed, I would start with the second I woke up in the morning and I would chronicle my day. I was up at 6 and I ate Pop-Tarts for breakfast and I took a shower and I went to school and here's what I wore and here's who I talked with. And it became not just a way for me to process all of my thoughts and feelings, but also a way to witness that I'm truly here, that I'm living this life, and that I matter.
Wow. You don't really think of it necessarily as that last statement that you said that you're here and you matter. You think of it as just in a lot of cases, you think of it just as I'm gonna unload on all my problems and look at all the troubles, the challenges, and I'm just gonna put all this into a journal and maybe lock it up and never look at it again, right? But you found a way where it actually resonates with you is a human being aspect, and that's amazing.
Well, and especially as a teenager, because it's so easy to feel lost and adrift and to not to not know where you belong or to not feel that you belong, whether it's in your family or your friend group or your community or what have you. And just having a place for me to prove that I matter. I matter to me, if to nobody else, just was so meaningful and still is so meaningful to me.
Mhm. So after those years, we'll say, where you started journaling as your angsty teenager, did it continue into your adult life? Like just the regular practice of journaling, whether that's daily, was it daily that you were journaling?
So I journaled daily for uh, 8 or 9 years in that way. It was very, again, very chronological, very historical, but also a way for me to synthesize what was happening in my life, how I felt about it all, what I was experiencing. And then I got married. And then I had some kids. And I don't know if you know this, but when you have people around you, it is often hard to take time for yourself. And my mother would tell me, you need to write things down because you are going to forget the cute and wonderful things that your children do. And I thought, Mom, like I have a very good memory. I'm very smart. I will always remember. And I'm laughing because I clearly don't. And that is the one regret I have in life is that I didn't journal enough when my kids were small, because not only did I miss documenting all of those moments, I missed out on a whole lot of years of getting to know myself and who I was and what I wanted. And before I knew it, I found myself really unhappy, but not knowing how unhappy I was because I got so far removed from a regular journaling practice, which is my way of really being mindful and being present in my life, that I became afraid. I became afraid to journal again because I had this sense that I wouldn't like what I saw.
Mm.
And so I avoided journaling for a really long time. And I would pull it out, here and there to document some things. And when I pulled out my journal, I would often start with, it's been 6 weeks and 4 days since the last time I journaled, as if it was confession. And do you know what that did to my journaling practice? It made me not want to have a journaling practice, right? Starting from a place of shame and guilt didn't inspire me to want to journal. So one day I just realized that I could jump right back in, no matter how long it had been. I didn't have My journal doesn't care, and I knew how long it had been since I had journaled, but just jumping right back in was really helpful. And that's actually what I did the night my marriage ended. My husband came home from work one day and told me point blank, I've decided I would be happier not being married to you. And I didn't know what to do with that, but I had enough wits about me to reach for something I knew had worked for me in the past. And that was coming to my journal and making myself write what I was grateful for. And it was really hard, Matt. I will tell you, I did not feel very grateful in that moment for very much. But I came up with 8 things. And I thought if I can be grateful for 8 things on the hardest day of my life, I'm going to be okay.
Mm.
And so I really turned back to my journal like I did when I was a teenager, for guidance and direction to understand my thoughts, but also to really figure out who I was, how I had gotten so lost from where I thought my life was going to go, who I wanted to be, how I wanted my life to be, and how I was going to get there. So I really started using my journal not just as a tool to process things, but to springboard me forward, which I think is the magic of journaling. The benefits of journaling and just getting stuff off my chest is amazing. But when I can get stuff off my chest and then solve my problems and then go do something about it, that's when journaling is really impactful.
Mm. Do you maintain all of your journals in a in some location, or is it after a few years you throw them away?
Yeah. So I could put my hands on most of my journals. Um, I definitely have my journals from college on up through. The ones from the last 4 years are actually in this room on a bookshelf. I moved here to this house 4 years ago. And so all of those journals are here because it's easier to stick them on a shelf than it is to figure out what else to do with them. Though I'm running out of shelf space, so I'm going to have to figure out what to do with them pretty soon. Things before that are in boxes in the basement. Um, and people ask me all the time, like, do you keep them? Do you reread them? Do I have to reread them if I write a journal? And my answer is always, I go back and reread when I need to go back and reread.
Mm.
Um, it's not very often. Sometimes I look back out of nostalgia, sometimes out of curiosity. Where was I 4 years ago today? What was I doing? What was my life like? Um, I always go back at the end of the year. I do this really robust reflection and goal setting. And so I always revisit where I was a year ago, just to benchmark and see. But it's also nice to be able to go back when I'm facing a challenge, right? Oh, I'm going through something. I remember I went through something similar, back then. How did I handle it back then? And be able to learn from old me, how to be resilient and get through it again, or to how to get through it better. Maybe I didn't handle the situation beautifully 2 years ago, and maybe I can, looking at that makes me realize how much better I can do.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, both in both facets, I think that works wonders when you actually know where your journals are and when you start early. And often you have that nostalgia feeling, or like you said, you look back at your younger self, like, how can I handle that? How did I handle that situation now that I'm in a similar situation? And maybe I can approach it similarly or different, but I know I can get through it because I went through it then.
Though I will say, for folks listening who are thinking, oh my gosh, there's no way I would ever want to look back and reread my old journals. It is totally fine to get rid of them, especially if you are writing just to unload the muck, right? Our brains are naturally wired to remember all of the terrible things that are ever happened to us. We don't need to go back and reread how terrible life was 2 years ago, 12 years ago, whenever, right? So sometimes if we are writing just to get stuff off our chest and out of our brain, it's okay to just let it go. I have friends who every time they finish a journal will just toss it in the fire pit, and just let it go.
Mm.
And so if you are listening and thinking, "Oh, I don't want a record of what my life has been like," so someone could open it and read how terrible I was, how dumb I was, how whatever the fear and the story we're telling ourselves, you can let it go. It's totally fine.
So one thing that you mentioned was the shame and guilt that you felt when you went back into journaling. I feel like that's going to be a challenge that a lot of people face, whether they're getting back into it or trying it for the first time. So, what advice can you give about how to overcome that?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I will tell you, not only have I experienced it, but I have seen almost all of my clients experience it. This idea that journaling has to be a certain thing, right? That it has to be an everyday practice or it doesn't count. It has to be written in a beautiful book or it doesn't count. I have to have gorgeous penmanship or it doesn't count, right? The stories we tell ourselves. So, what I always tell people is there is no right way to do this, and there is no wrong way to do this. It's just the way that works for you. And if what works for you is different than what works for me, that's wonderful, right? Because we've each found a practice that we like. Um, I will say if it has been a while since you journaled, just jump right back in. You don't need to explain where you've been. You don't need to make excuses for why you haven't written. Your journal doesn't have feelings. It's not keeping track of time. Um, just being able to jump in and embrace the practice, however imperfectly. If you have not journaled before but have wanted to, great. Today is the perfect day to start. And you can start by just putting some words on a page. I think we get this idea that journaling, everything we write in our journals has to be meaningful.
Mm.
And that is not true. There are a whole lot of days I just write about what I had for breakfast, right? I have a daily journaling practice because I have found for me that that's what I need to be the best version of myself. But not everything I write is super important. But by showing up and practicing every day, by building that muscle, by showing up every day at a certain time, because that's how I'm going to make sure that I do it,
Mhm.
it tells the universe, this is where you can find me when you're ready to send me the answers.
Mm.
So that's why I journal every day. But I think it's really important to remember that having a consistent journaling practice does not have to be a daily journaling practice. I work with folks who journal just on the weekdays. I work with other folks who journal just on the weekends. I journal with some folks who only journal with me when we journal together. They don't journal any other time. They mean to, they think about it, they just don't, right? And so there is no rule about you have to do this every day or it doesn't count, right? If you want to journal only on days when you wake up and without thinking about it, wear your favorite blue socks, cool. You can consistently build a journaling practice around that if that's your jam.
So I'm hoping that after people listen to this episode, they get inspired to whether that's revisit journaling or start journaling for the first time. So if how can you speak to them for a minute and how they can start journaling? How does that how can they start journaling?
Yeah. So I often recommend to folks who want to journal with pen and paper to find something that feels good to write on, right? Go to the store if you can and look at journals and find something that's going to inspire you to write in it, whether it's a composition notebook or a spiral bound notebook, or if it's an actual journal, right? There are all kinds of journals out there. Find one that calls to you, that seems to you that you would look forward to writing in it. And then all all you need to do is start. And I think that's the most exciting part is just getting started. I always recommend to folks, if you're not sure what to write about, introduce yourself, right? Think of your journal
Yeah.
as your new best friend. What does your journal need to know about you? What are your goals for journaling? What do you want to get out of it? Because I've realized that we often have these unspoken expectations of what journaling should be or what it's going to do for us.
Mm.
And when we take the time to define that, to get really clear on what we want, it's so much easier for us to find the journaling practices and the tools and techniques that'll help us get there.
That's an interesting technique because we hear that I've heard that a lot in social media when you're writing your posts, you talk to one person, right? And I never thought of that in the journaling sense of, hey, talk to the journal like it's your best friend. And I mean, just like you would start a normal conversation with somebody else, you're just introducing yourself.
Yeah, because when we are having a conversation with our journal, and I'm not saying that anyone needs to start your journal entry with Dear Journal or Dear Diary or anything like that, right? But having a conversation with your journal is really having a conversation with yourself. And the very most important thing we can do in our journaling is to be honest. And I always say when I work with people to bring three things: to be willing to be open, to be brave, and to be kind, because doing this can be really hard work. Sitting with our thoughts and being able to put them on paper or on the screen, however you're journaling, it's a skill and it does not always come easily. It does not always feel comfortable. It doesn't always feel good when we journal. I wish I could sit here and say, oh, journaling is wonderful and it's all rainbows and sunshine. And it's often not. It's often, I'm really upset. Let me figure out why.
Mm.
Right. And as we are open and honest and willing to dig, we often will find some things that we didn't expect. I like to think that I always will know what I'm going to see on the other side of my pen. And there's a whole lot of days I am so surprised at what I see. And it's not always pretty. And that's why I say be brave, right? Be willing to explore, be willing to be curious, be willing to just really dig deep and ask yourself hard questions and stick to it to find those answers. Because there's always enough distance between our brains and the page to get the perspective that we need. So even when we uncover something that's uncomfortable or scary, we've given it now enough space for us to be able to figure out what we're going to do about it or do with it. And then be kind, be really, really kind to yourself. Because again, this can be hard. If you're starting a new practice or reviving a practice or journaling in a different way, it can be so hard. So be really kind to yourself. But what I've noticed in all of this, in my own personal work and my work with clients, is that the more we journal, the more we know ourselves. The more we know ourselves, the more compassion we develop for ourselves. And the more self-compassionate we are, the more we can love ourselves. And it has been so amazing to watch folks, myself included, really embrace this journey through journaling, which is something I never could have expected when I was an angsty teenager.
Hmm. So if day one they open up their notebook or they pull out their computer and start typing, the first thing they do is introduce themselves to talk about their goals of what they wish would happen with their journaling. What happens after that? What do they do next when it comes, or what are the easiest things they can do next to continue getting in their journal?
Yeah, great, great question. So I'm going to share three journaling techniques that we can use because I think it's really important that in building a journaling practice, we are not just a one-trick pony. I get I get my knickers in a twist all the time when I hear people on the internet say, "This is the way you should journal," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, that's one way you could journal." And I love to think about it in terms of a toolbox because we all have a toolbox at home. And in our toolbox, we have a hammer. And a hammer is really good at one certain or a few certain kinds of things, right? It's really good at putting nails in the wall, pulling them out of the wall, and smashing lids on paint cans. But a hammer is never going to fix your bathroom sink, right? To fix your bathroom sink, you need a wrench and a pair of pliers and a screwdriver. So having a well-stocked toolbox, knowing what we have and when and how to use them helps us get our fix-it jobs done. I think about having a journaler's toolbox. So one of the tools that should be in our toolbox is this idea called stream of consciousness journaling. You might have heard it called free writing or brain dumping. It's this idea of you just take what's in your brain and you put it on the page. There is no right way to do this. There is no wrong way to do this. It's just however you do it is how you do it. And for some people, it feels really good. I turn to this all the time when I have a hard day, right? And I just want to get the stuff out, right? I'm feeling this way because, and this thing happened, right? And I think as you start doing it, you're like, oh, now I see, right, how this could be very cathartic, right? Or I'm really happy because, or I'm looking forward to, whatever. I do some of this every morning. And for me, it's a way to really take a look and assess, how am I feeling today? What's going on? What's going on in my body? What am I excited about? What am I worried about? And just being able to connect whatever's in my brain with the page. So that's one technique that everyone should have in their toolbox. The second one are having some journal prompts. Journal prompts are ideas of what to write about. They're often phrased as questions or statements, but I love journal prompts because it helps give us a container for our thoughts and it helps our brain have a job to do. Because for some people, the thought of staring at a blank page is really intimidating. So if you have a journal prompt, then you have a place to start. And journal prompts can be really simple. It can be, how am I feeling today? What am I excited about? I feel happy when, right? And then we have a chance to get to explore maybe something different that we wouldn't have thought to explore on our own. Or if our brains are feeling rambly, we give our brains a job to do by answering this question. And it's it's a really valuable tool for really helping us stay focused and really dig deep in our journaling. Journal prompts you can find any anywhere. You can find journals that are pre-printed with prompts. Um, if you find one and it calls to you, awesome. I always suggest to folks, if you're going to go this route, like make sure you flip through it, look past the first page or two, see if it really resonates, and if you're going to be inspired to keep picking it up. Or if the prompts really don't call to you and you think, oh, if there's no way I'm going to show up tomorrow, if this is the prompt I'm going to answer, right? So really to have some prompts handy that really call to you that you're going to want to use. And the third tool is having a gratitude practice. Being able to use your journal to increase your gratitude is both an amazing thing to do just in general, but also really good on those super hard days when you feel like, ugh, there's nothing good in my life. Oh, wait, you know what? I do have some good things, and I can be really grateful for those. And I love to share two basic ways to do it. There's the one way, which I call the quantity approach, right? It's just make a list of all the things, all the things. On my hardest day, I came up with 8 things, which was wonderful. You know, other people might want to do 3 things or 5 things, or just make a list until you can't think of anything anymore, right? And the whole point of it is just to allow yourself to feel the weight of your gratitude. But for a lot of people, that gets a little stale, right? If every day you're writing 3 things you're grateful for, you might find yourself talking about the same thing every day. I'm grateful for my home. I'm grateful for my dog. I'm grateful for, the opportunity to go to school or whatever it is. So I love to suggest this deep dive approach where you ask yourself, what am I grateful for? Why am I grateful? And how can I show my gratitude? And I found that in using these clarifying questions, it really helps deepen my gratitude and really helps me feel the weight of it. That is deeper in a way that doesn't often come up or doesn't always come up when I'm just making a list of what I'm grateful for.
Mm. So let's say they start, they do their introduction, they put their goals, and then they decide they're going to pick one of the 3 techniques that you just provided. How do they stay consistent? Whether, like you said, that's daily, weekly, when they put on their blue socks. However, how do they find that consistency?
Hmm. Great question. For me, the answer is in flexibility, right? We get to determine what consistency looks like. And I love to share with folks that how that showing up is more important than what you do when you show up, right? Does that make sense? I think it makes sense, right? That you journal is so much more important than how you journal. So give yourself the freedom of being able to journal differently every day if that's what you want to do. If somebody told me I had to journal the same exact way every single day, I would have given up a long, long time ago, right? But um, being able to determine every day or every time you journal, well, what do I need? What journaling technique is going to help get me there? And you can take these different techniques and kind of interweave them. Oftentimes, I will start by just, dumping thoughts on the page, and then I'll come up with a question I want to explore. And then, from there, I weave gratitude in there because I think everything is better with a dose of gratitude. So be really I would say be really flexible and really kind to yourself, right? If journaling feels hard on a particular day, um, honor that, right? I have some days that are just beautiful journaling days where I sit down and the sun is shining and my ideas flow and my sentence structure is great and my handwriting's beautiful and everything is sunshine and roses. And then other days, I can hardly string 2 coherent sentences together. Some days I write the date and then I sit for 10 minutes. And then I say, that's all I got today, right? Um, and giving myself that grace and remembering that it's the showing up that matters. It's the building our it's the building our muscle. So I always recommend folks not give themselves a quota. right? Not have expectations for what you're going to accomplish. If I thought I was going to write 3 pages every day in my journal, I would, again, have stopped journaling a long time ago, right? But giving myself the freedom and the permission um, to let it feel good and let it be what it is that particular day.
Mm. Do you recommend somebody pick a specific time in the day to journal each time?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea because the things we schedule are the things we're more likely to get done. Um, I journal in the morning because that's what works for me well these days. But for most of the time I journaled in the evening. Um, I always say the best time to journal is the time that works for you, the time you're going to remember to do it. So whether it's in the morning before your day starts, it's at lunchtime, it's after school or work, it's, at night in those 10 minutes you get when everybody is busy doing something else and you finally get a chance to breathe, whatever it is. And if you're not sure what time is best for you, play around, try different things, see what you like, see what feels good. If you're not sure what time would work best, think about something you already do on the regular basis. Do you drink a cup of coffee in the morning? Can you pair journaling with your cup of coffee? Do you have a cup of tea at night? Can you pair it with that? Do you take a walk around the block in the evening before dinner? Can you fit 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 2 minutes of journaling in that time frame? And I think it's important to remember too that a journaling practice does not have to be lengthy to be effective, right? If all we journal is 2 minutes a day, it can help us. If we journal 5 minutes a day, it can help us. And I think sometimes we just have this idea that a journaling practice needs to be big and it needs to be substantial, it needs to be super important. And I think we're overcomplicating things because, again, it's building that muscle, building that habit. So when we need journaling, it's there for us. Because I will tell you, if I had not found journaling as an angsty teenager, and journaled consistently for years and years, it never would have occurred to me to turn to journaling when I got divorced.
Mm.
That's how I was able to turn to it is because I had this muscle memory. Like, oh yeah, I remember when I'm feeling overwhelmed and sad and all the big emotions, I can use this to feel better. Right. And so just showing up, just getting started, just doing what we can and starting small. And if you think starting small is too big, start teeny, teeny, tiny. Write a sentence. It counts and it matters.
Mhm. So I want to speak to the individuals that have been journaling for a lot longer, and let's say they have this consistent practice. For those who are looking for, let's say, a challenge or maybe a more difficult way of journaling, is there a technique out there that whether maybe you're trying to learn to master or that somebody else can learn to try to challenge themselves in the sense of journaling?
That's a great idea. I think I would say the challenge is maybe getting out of routine. And especially if we have a journaling practice that looks very similar from day to day, giving ourselves the freedom and the challenge and the opportunity to maybe dig a little deeper,
Mm.
right? Maybe because I don't think we necessarily need a lot of different techniques in our toolbox. I think just being willing to maybe find some new prompts or to um, maybe share what you've journaled with somebody else. I run these beautiful journaling groups, and I will tell you um, that journaling with other people can be really magical and special and cool. As we each go on this journey of self-discovery, right? Knowing that there are other people holding space for us, knowing that other people are on their own journeys, and then being able to come back together and share where we've been, what we've learned, has been a really amazing way for me to grow my practice um, and to learn and grow with others.
Do you think there's a difference in how people should approach journaling or their sense of journaling between men and women?
Wow, that is an interesting question that I've never gotten before. Um, I will say it's really funny to me because when I talk to people about journaling, I get a whole lot of people, both men and women, who are like, oh, journaling is just for girls. Journaling is something that teenage girls do. They keep diaries. I have a friend who is in his early 60s, and he is a big, tough man. And he, for years, was like, nope, I don't journal. I will never journal. Journaling's for girls. And one day I was at his house and I was like, oh, what's that notebook? And he's like, oh, that's my morning planner book. And I was like, cool, tell me about it. And he starts, opens it up and he starts showing me how he uses it in the mornings to plan his day. He sits down with his coffee and he thinks about what do I want my day to be like? What are the important things for me to do today? What are the ways that I need to how do I want to show up? And I looked at him and I was like, that sounds a whole lot like journaling to me. And he's like, no, it's not a journal. Well, he calls it journaling because that's what it is. And I think there's so much magic in calling it what it is, because when we call it journaling, we open ourselves to this whole range of benefits that journaling can bring to us. So when you ask me, is there a difference between men and women journaling and the way they journal or could or should journal? I would say the differences are a lot smaller than you think. I think we are the only ones who put an idea in our head of what it should be like. I know men who have very sentimental journaling practices. I know women who have very nuts and bolts journaling practice. I worked with a client once who said, I am not interested in talking about my feelings at all. I am here in this group because I want to learn to be a better manager. Right. But if you ask me to write about how I feel, I'm not going to do it. Um, and her journaling practice was just as valid and just as satisfying for her as, you know, other folks who do want to write about their thoughts and their feelings.
So in the journaling group that you have, is there a dominant gender in that group?
I always say my spaces are generally feminine energy spaces. Um, I've had men journal with me. I have had women and non-binary folks journal with me. Um, I think the predominant quality are folks who are willing to be open, brave, and kind. Those open-hearted, curious people who want to know themselves better. I tend to draw more women because I have, again, this very feminine energy spaces. Um, but men who show up to my group never feel excluded.
Hmm. Do you think that men have a difficult time opening up emotionally when it comes to journaling?
I think some men do, but I think some people do. Um, and I think there's this super important idea that we need to give ourselves permission to express our feelings or to even explore putting our thoughts on paper, right? Because if we don't want to talk about our feelings in our journals, we never have to talk about our feelings in our journals. Um, but just being willing to explore what we think and how we feel, or what we think, putting our thoughts on paper. Um, and now I've gotten so off course, I can't remember the question you asked me. I'm so sorry.
It was, do you think that men have a hard time opening up emotionally when it comes to journaling?
Yeah, let me start over with that one. Yeah, I think some men do, and I think some women do. I think just in general, the idea of sitting with our thoughts can be really, really hard. I know for me, it was really hard, and I consider myself an open-hearted, curious person, and also learning to be still and to go beyond the surface thoughts in my brain was really, really hard. But I think if we give ourselves permission to be curious and we give ourselves permission to be uncomfortable, right? I think sometimes we're so uncomfortable with this idea of being uncomfortable, and we will do anything to avoid discomfort,
Hmm.
right? Um, that if we're willing to allow ourselves to be uncomfortable, to allow it to be messy, right? So often we think that journaling has to be neat and tidy and pretty and look a certain way, and it doesn't, right? This can be messy. We can't, if coming up with your words to access your thoughts doesn't work for you, right? Scribble a doodle on your page, right? If you're having a really hard day and you just want to take your pen and just color the whole page black, that totally counts as journaling too. I wouldn't recommend you do it on the regular, right? But just giving yourself space to practice connecting with yourself is super important. Um, yeah, and it stinks that we live in a world where still so many men are taught, oh, you got to be tough and you got to be strong and you can't let yourself feel things. I think we need to have a whole lot of compassion for people who've grown up feeling that way,
Hmm.
but it doesn't have to be like that.
Are there any other myths that you hear about journaling that you want to debunk?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is just that journaling has to look a certain way. Um, I talk to people all the time who just they're like, I know it's embarrassing and like it sounds stupid, but I want my journal to look like it should be on Instagram, right? Like
Mm.
I like,
Aesthetically pleasing.
yeah, my journaling doesn't look like that at all, right? It doesn't have to be neat and tidy. It doesn't have to be deep. Um, it doesn't have to follow a certain structure. It doesn't have to look the same every day. And I think the more we can give ourselves permission to look inward and think about what we need and use our journaling to deliver it, the better we are, and the better able we are to know ourselves, have self-compassion, and grow into self-love.
Mhm. So now we're getting near the end of the podcast. So I have three final questions, which I ask all the guests. And these three questions are over the topics of what this podcast is, which is live, love, and grow. So the first question I have is, what advice can you share about how to create a life that leaves a positive impact on the world?
Great question. Can you read it one more time?
What advice can you share about how to create a life that leaves a positive impact on the world?
I would say be kind. Be kind to others and really be kind to yourselves because it's hard to be in this world when we're being mean to ourselves, and it's
Mhm.
hard to have an impact on others when we're beating ourselves up all the time. So yeah, just be really, really kind.
The second question I have is, what are some practical ways people can cultivate self-love?
Yeah, journal, 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 journal. um but really get to know yourself, take care of yourself. um Talk nicely to yourself. Look in the mirror and smile and give yourself a sincere compliment, right? Tell yourself that you look great, that you're smart, that you're strong, that you're brave, that you're resilient, right? Whatever it is that you want to be and grow, or whatever it is that people always tell you about yourself that you just have a hard time believing, right?
Mhm.
Lean into that, become that. Um, yeah, and journal.
The last question I have is, what is one actionable tip someone can do today to grow 1% better?
Oh, I love it. Maybe start journaling. If you want a different answer, I will say, yeah, just give yourself a moment to feel joy and allow yourself to feel joy today. We go through lives so busy and so ready to move on to the next thing and the next thing that sometimes it's really easy to get to the end of the day and realize, like, oh, I didn't have any fun today. I didn't talk to enough people. I didn't do anything nice for myself, right? So take even just 2, 3, 5 minutes, go outside, stand in the grass with your bare feet. Take your time brushing your teeth, whatever it is that's going to give you a moment to just come back to yourself. Yeah, and have joy
Hmm.
in doing it. And also pick up your pen and journal.
How can people connect with you?
Yeah, the best place to find me these days is on LinkedIn. You can find me at Amanda Stern Journaling. Um, yeah, that's the best place.
And how can we support you on your journey?
Ooh, that is a great question, one I was not expecting. Um, Two things. You can start by being really kind to yourself. Do something nice for you, and then do something nice for somebody else,
Hmm.
right? Because if we all are a little kinder to ourselves and we are all a little kinder to someone else, it'll just make the world a better place.
I love those answers. Well, Amanda, it was really great having you on, and I love the passion and enthusiasm you have over journaling, and I hope that and not just that enthusiasm, passion, but everything that's everybody learned on this episode, they carry with them and they start journaling and feeling the power that journaling has. And I just want to thank you, acknowledge you for all the work that you're doing and coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. And if you have questions, if you need help or support, if you want someone to cheerlead you and celebrate that you have started journaling or started journaling again for the 82nd time, like, please connect with me. I will be happy to cheerlead you for sure.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast. I hope you took something away from this episode that you can implement today just like I did. I'd love to know what your biggest takeaway was from this episode. Let me know by sharing this episode in your Instagram stories and tag me at Matt Fendora. If you've enjoyed this episode, the ones before, and or you're looking forward to future episodes, please hit that subscribe or follow button. It helps me get this information to even more people. No matter what you choose to do, choose to live, love, and grow. Thank you, and have an outstanding day.